workmen would have been thereby benefited. Distrust each other as they may, the employers and the employed must rise or fall together. There may be some difference as to chronology, none as to fact. But the masters did not choose to make all these circumstances known. They stood upon being the masters, and that they had a right to order work at their own prices, and they believed that in the present depression of trade and unemployment of hands, there would be no great difficulty in getting it done. Now let us turn to the workmen's view of the question. The masters, of the tottering foundation of whose prosperity they were ignorant, seemed doing well, and, like gentlemen, lived at home in ease, while they were starving, gasping on from day to day, and there was a foreign order to be executed, the extent of which, large as it was greatly exaggerated, and it was to be done speedily. Why were the masters offering such low wages under these circumstances? Shame upon them! It was taking advantage of their work people being almost starved, but they would starve entirely rather than come into such terms. It was bad enough to be poor, while by the labour of their thin hands, the sweat of their brows, the masters were made rich. But they would not be utterly ground down to dust. No, they would fold their hands and sit idle, and smile at the masters, whom even in death they could baffle. With Spartan endurance they determined to let the employers know their power, by refusing to work. So class distrusted class, and their want of mutual confidence wrought sorrow to both. The masters would not be bullied, and compelled to reveal why they felt it wisest and best to offer only such low wages. They would not be made to tell that they were even sacrificing capital to obtain a decisive victory over the continental manufacturers. And the workmen sat silent and stern, with folded hands, refusing to work for such pay. There was a strike in Manchester. Of course it was succeeded by the usual consequences. Many other trades unions, connected with different branches of business, supported with money, countenance, and encouragement of every kind, the stand which the Manchester power loom weavers were making against their masters. Delegates from Glasgow, from Nottingham, and other towns, were sent to Manchester to keep up the spirit of resistance. A committee was formed, and all the requisite officers elected, chairman, treasurer, honorary secretary. Among them was John Barton. The masters meanwhile took their measure. They placarded the walls with advertisements for power loom weavers. The workmen replied by a placard in still larger letters stating their grievances. The masters met daily in town to mourn over the time, so fast slipping away, for the fulfilment of the foreign orders, and to strengthen each other in their resolution not to yield. If they gave up now, they might give up always. It would never do. And amongst the most energetic of the masters, the Carsons, father and son, took their places. It is well known that there is no religionist so zealous as a convert, no masters so stern, and regardless of the interests of their work people, as those who have risen from such a station themselves. This would account for the elder Mr. Carson's determination not to be bullied into yielding, not even to be bullied into giving reasons for acting as the masters did. It was the employer's will, and that should be enough for the employed. Harry Carson did not trouble himself much about the grounds for his conduct. He liked the excitement of the affair. He liked the attitude of resistance. He was brave, and he liked the idea of personal danger, with which some of the more cautious tried to intimidate the violent among the masters. Meanwhile, the power loom weavers living in the more remote parts of Lancashire and the neighbouring counties heard of the masters' advertisements for workmen, and in their solitary dwellings grew weary of starvation, and resolved to come to Manchester. Footsore, way-worn, half-starved looking men they were, as they tried to steal into town in the early dawn, before people were astir, or in the dusk of the evening. And now began the real wrong-doing of the trades unions. As to their decision to work, or not, at such a particular rate of wages, that was either wise or unwise, all error of judgment at the worst. But they had no right to tyrannise over others, and tie them down to their own procrustine bed, abhorring what they considered oppression in the masters. Why did they oppress others? Because, when men get excited, they know not what they do. Judge, then, with something of the mercy of the Holy One, whom we all love. In spite of policemen set to watch over the safety of the poor country weavers, in spite of magistrates, and prisons and severe punishments, the poor depressed men tramping in from Burnley, Padiham, and other places, to work at the condemned starvation prices, were waylaid and beaten, and left by the roadside almost for dead. The police broke up every lounging knot of men. They separated quietly, to reunite half a mile out of town. Of course, the feeling between the masters and the workmen did not improve under these circumstances. Combination is an awful power. It is like the equally mighty agency of steam, capable of almost unlimited good or evil. But to obtain a blessing on its labours, it must work under the direction of a high and intelligent will, incapable of being misled by passion or excitement. The will of the operatives had not been guided to the calmness of wisdom. So much for generalities. Let us now return to individuals. A note, respectfully worded, although its tone of determination was strong, had been sent by the power loom weavers, requesting that a deputation of them might have a meeting with the masters, to state the conditions they must have fulfilled before they would end the turnout. They thought they had attained a sufficiently commanding position to dictate. John Barton was appointed one of the deputation. The masters agreed to this meeting, being anxious to end the strife, although undetermined among themselves how far they should yield, or whether they should yield at all. Some of the old, whose experience had taught them sympathy, were for concession. Others, white-headed men too, had only learnt hardness and obstinacy from the days of the years of their lives, and sneered at the more gentle and yielding. The younger men were one and all for an unflinching resistance to claims urged with so much violence. Of this party, Harry Carson was the leader. But like all energetic people, the more he had to do, the more time he seemed to find. With all his letter writing, his calling, his being present at the New Bailey, when investigations of any case of violence against knobsticks were going on, he beset Mary more than ever. She was weary of her life for him. From blandishments He had even gone to threats.